If someone asked me to describe God of War with just one word, that word would be epic. Hence the title of this video. Everything about this game, from combat to soundtrack, from art design to dialogue, all come together to form one big epic story. It's the best game I have ever played, period. Before playing God of War, my favorite game was Red Dead Redemption 2. Although that game certainly has a deeper and more engaging story, God of War surpasses it in almost every other metric. It has better gameplay, better controls, better cutscenes, better everything. Santa Monica achieved something truly remarkable here. I haven't played the earlier games focused on the Greek pantheon, so I cannot vouch for them. But this new reboot offers everything one could possibly want from a video game, and some more. Its combat is fun and incredibly satisfying. Its puzzles are intricate and challenging. Its side content is interesting. Its exploration is tough but rewarding. It has a deeply emotional story that moves you in ways that you could have never imagined. Its progression is complex enough so that it incentivizes some thought and planning without being overwhelmingly difficult like in Souls games. All in all, God of War is an amazing action-adventure game that should be experienced by everyone, with even the slightest interest in video games. Of course, that doesn't mean it's flawless, because it's not. I want to start with those flaws, because they are few in number, so we can deal with them quickly before moving on to the exciting stuff. The biggest shortfall of this game, and frankly of most games from that era, is the loading screens. Or the lack thereof in this case. Because this game does not have any loading screens whatsoever, aside from the first one you see when launching the game. Instead of making the player sit through long and boring loading sessions, Santa Monica chose a different approach. They planted little traversal challenges between different parts of the map, so that when you want to move from one part to another, you first have to complete that small challenge, during which next part of the map is loaded into the video memory. It's definitely better than a loading screen, but it's still not ideal. To be fair, this game was first released for PS4 and PS4 Pro, both of which have old school spinning hard drives. So this was actually the lesser evil at that time. But they could have easily avoided this in the PS5 and PC versions, but they didn't. So it's definitely a minus. Fingers crossed for the upcoming PC version of Ragnarok, which I look forward to. Another downside that should be mentioned is the boss variety. There are a lot of bosses in this game, so the problem is not the actual quantity. Rather, the problem is that almost half of these so-called bosses share the same basic design with only minor changes. So they are more like reskins rather than unique enemies. By the way, they fixed this issue in Ragnarok, but that's not the topic of discussion today. One final complaint that I have is about the unskippable animations. Every time you open a chest or faced with the remains of a boss you've just slain, you have to wait through an animation for each separate item that you loot. It's not a huge problem if you just have to loot one or two things, but when you want to loot several items in quick succession, you just sit there doing nothing, except waiting for each animation to finish and then pressing circle to move on to the next item, which is very annoying to say the least. That's it. I have no other complaints or reservations about this game. In my opinion, Santa Monica got everything else right. So let's talk about that, shall we? The game makes a great first impression by transitioning directly from the menu screen to gameplay, which was the first time I have seen such a thing, and boy was I impressed. Also, I find the fact that the whole game is one continuous shot to be incredible and pioneering. Transitions between gameplay and cutscenes are seamless. In fact, they are so good that sometimes you don't even notice the game has switched to a cutscene from gameplay, or vice versa. Moreover, the combat in this game is amazing and second to none. It might not have the depth or complexity of the combat in Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, but it's incredible in its own right. You have a light and a heavy attack, which can be comboed in various different ways to increase your damage output. You also have two special runic attacks for each weapon. Again, one light and one heavy attack. You can dish out serious damage with these attacks, especially if you upgrade them. As the game progresses and you accumulate more experience points, you get access to more runic attacks and more combos by unlocking new skills in the skill tree, using the XP you acquired. You can also upgrade the gear and skills of your companion, which in this case is Atreus. You have different armor sets with different stats and perks, enchantments which you can slot into your armor to improve your stats, and a talisman that provides a special bonus like health regeneration or realm shift. By the way, realm shift is just a fancy expression for slowing down time. You also have numerous options on how to equip your character, and all of those options are viable depending on your strategy. You can mix and match between different gears and try different builds to favor some stats over the others. For instance, if you prefer a defensive fighting style, you can choose your armor and enchantments accordingly, and use your XP on defensive skills to increase your overall defense. I think a game's progression system should mainly be judged by the extent to which it can accommodate different strategies and playstyles. So in that sense, progression in God of War is perfect. There are a lot of enemy types, each with its own distinct design and unique moveset. You never fight against a specific enemy type for too long. I only found the Revenants to be extremely annoying to deal with. Other than that, all enemies are well designed and balanced in my opinion. Another commendable aspect of the game is its art design. From the gorgeous landscape surrounding Freya's house to the costumes and armor sets worn by each character, everything in this game looks beautiful. You can tell a lot of care and creative effort was dedicated during development to make sure it all comes together to form one cohesive art direction. Character models and animations are great. Graphics as a whole is more than satisfactory. I played the game on a PC at 4K 60 FPS, and it was buttery smooth. I did not notice any frame drops, aside from a few rare cases. Keep in mind that I was also recording at 4K, so I don't think you'll be unhappy with this game's performance. I've also come across several bugs during my playthrough, but they were few and far between, so they didn't have a significant impact on my experience. This game's side content is among the best I have ever witnessed. You get so much content in this game, and in contrast to most other games, most of that content is actually fun and rewarding. Besides the main questline, you have several side missions called favors, some additional content called labors, treasure maps, Muspelheim trials, so on and so forth. But it doesn't end there. You also have a huge map separated into 6 different realms, each with their own set of distinct puzzles, enemy types, and overall design. You know how in other games, Assassin's Creed, side content and exploration is repetitive and meaningless? Well, not in this game. Here you want to do the side content and you want to explore. Because first, the combat is excellent, so you are always looking for more opportunities to fight. And second, you want all the loot you can get so that you can level up and kick some more ass. The game just makes you want to play more and more all the time, which is a good thing, obviously. What else? The story is also great. All the characters are believable, consistent and well developed. Kratos in the early game is very different to the Kratos in the late game, and this change in his character happens in a very natural way. In the beginning he is cold and distant towards his son and everyone else. He calls him boy, like he's some stranger. Even though you can feel his love for him, you can tell he doesn't have any experience raising a child, which shows in scenes like this where he can't even touch his own son. Events that take place during the story transform this tough and bitter Greek god to a loving and compassionate person in the end, whom now does not hesitate to touch his son, or even call him son, like a normal person would. This remarkable transformation in Kratos' character alone speaks volumes for the quality of writing in this game. Like his father, Atreus also goes through a significant transformation. He goes from a little boy who can't even kill a deer to a spoiled brat who constantly disrespects his own father to a mature and promising young god in the end. Aside from the characters, the story is filled with amazing one-liners like this.
Do not be sorry. Be better.
Or this.
Yuna, we're going to Yuna. We're going to find the long-lost realm of the giants. That's...
Inconvenient.
Or this.
You don't need to make excuses to say hello.
Not to mention the pieces of wisdom you get from Kratos from time to time in the form of mic drop moments such as this.
Gratitude does not pay for weapon upkeep, boy.
Or this.
There is no failure in training. We can surpass it with practice.
Or this.
You are hunting deer, not chasing it.
Besides, it's the only game in which you can run around with a human head who warns you about incoming attacks and tells beautiful stories during your travels. So what's not to like? What else? Well, the camera work and cutscene direction is spectacular. The game is filled with beautiful shots like this. Soundtrack is great and contributes in no small part to the game's amazing atmosphere. I particularly enjoyed a few songs such as the main theme or the Valkyrie score. Speaking about Valkyries, what about them, you might ask? Well, let me tell you this first. If you think Baldur was the hardest boss in this game, you are in for a surprise. Valkyries are the actual final boss of this game, especially their queen, Sigrun. In total there are 9 Valkyries, including their queen. In order to fight Sigrun, you first have to kill all the other Valkyries, which I assure you is no small feat. Valkyries are tough and resilient, and their movesets are very unpredictable. So you can't just kill them easily in one go, like you expect to with other bosses. You first have to learn their moves and how to counter them before even thinking about defeating them. In fact, it took me about 4 hours to beat Sigrun in Give Me a Challenge difficulty. Granted, I was quite underleveled for that fight, but still it was very difficult. I am planning to make another video dedicated solely to Valkyries, so I will talk more about them in that video. Lastly, I want to talk briefly about Muspelheim Trials. Muspelheim is one of the 6 realms you have access to, and it's a small realm with combat trials scattered all around it. There is also a Valkyrie here, which you can fight after completing a certain number of trials. I actually enjoyed these trials. They were chaotic and fun, but they were not as challenging as I expected them to be. The only trial that gave me a hard time was the one in which you can't take any damage. I attempted to beat that trial maybe 15 times before finally succeeding. But that was mainly due to me not having a resurrection stone. Talking about resurrection stones, I think they're a nice touch. You can buy these stones from any shop in the game, which then gives you a second chance in combat in the case of your death. If you possess a resurrection stone when you die, you can press square and Atreus immediately comes to the rescue and revives you. This is especially useful against difficult bosses like Valkyries, so I suggest you always carry one with you at all times, because you never know when you'll be needing one. So how good is God of War? Well, to me, it's the best game there is, regardless of genre, generation or platform. It certainly has some rough edges, few of which I've spoken about earlier. But in the end, there are only a handful of games as satisfying and fun to play as God of War, and its Metacritic score reflects that. I have finished it 2 times already, and can't wait to finish it once more in the highest difficulty. So if you haven't played it yet, pick it up and do so as soon as possible. It's gonna be worth it, I promise. And know that I envy you, because you will be experiencing it for the first time. Oh, what I wouldn't give for erasing this game from memory and playing it like a new release. So that's how good it is.